Okay, so we're going to get started. Happy Wednesday, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Emily Miner, and I'm a senior advisor at LRN's Ethics and Compliance Advisory Services practice. And I am happy to be kicking off our first webinar of 2022. We have a really important topic to cover today. Around how to encourage speaking out in today's age of whistleblowing. Before we jump into things, I want to cover just a few housekeeping notes. If at any time throughout this next hour you have a question, a comment, something you'd like to add, please drop that in the Q&A box. There should be a bar at the bottom of your screen. And so we want to make sure that this is an interactive discussion. If you have a general question or a question for a specific panelist, I will be sure to bring that in, into the conversation. And if for some reason we're not able to get through all of the questions, we'll make sure to connect with you after the fact. We will also be saving some time at the end for just open discussion and Q&A. We also are pleased to share that this webinar has been approved by the Compliance Certification Board for up to 1.2 CCB CEUs. That's based on your attending the entirety of the event. So if you plan to claim these credits, please do stay on until the end, and we will send the certification a few days, in a few days, enclosed as part of our follow-up email along with the recording link. So I think that's all that I have for housekeeping. So let's jump into this. So again, we're here today to talk about speaking up. It's a critical concern and function of the Ethics and Compliance Department in any organization, and a critical concern of leadership in organizations broadly. And speaking up about corporate misconduct is on the rise. We're also seeing that employees are increasingly going directly to regulators to share their concerns. In fact, the SEC's whistleblower program saw an increase of 76% in terms of reports to their program in 2021. So what we want to talk about today is understanding, what are the conditions that like why are people going directly to regulators, and how can we create an environment in our own organizations where people feel safe to speak up internally. Of course, we can only address issues about which we're aware, so it's really critical to foster that culture of trust and freedom of expression. So employees choose to blow the whistle for a variety of reasons, but two main reasons are when they've raised their concerns internally through available channels to no avail. And we see that in the case of one of the Theranos whistleblowers, Tyler Schultz, who raised his concerns internally before he went externally to raise the issues that are unfolding or have been unfolding in the courtroom just in these past few weeks. We also see whistleblowers raising their concerns when their trust, their faith in their organization is so low that they don't even try to avail themselves of internal channels. And we see this in the case of yet another high-profile whistleblower case right now, that of the Facebook whistleblower, Frances Haugen. So how can we work to create this, the levels of trust between our organizations and our employees so that people feel free to come to us when they have concerns about what's going on, or if they have questions, they're not sure if what they're seeing, is in alignment with values and our codes of conduct. How can we create that level of trust? How can we create faith in organizational justice processes, and how can we create a sense of, we're all in this together? So here to talk with all of us about this topic, I'm pleased to introduce our three panelists, and I look forward to hearing their wisdom on this issue. I'll start with Heidi Teresi. Heidi is the Director of U.S. Ethics and Compliance at Bausch Health. She supports their pharmaceuticals and neurology divisions and previously worked in a variety of ethics and compliance roles for Bristol-Myers Squibb and Novartis Pharmaceuticals. Heidi holds a bachelor's in criminal justice from York College and served as a sergeant in the U.S. Army as a medical specialist. Down counterclockwise, according to my grid at least, is Tina Tolliver, who is the Chief Compliance, Ethics, and Risk Officer / Privacy Officer for Millennium Healthcare, one of Florida's largest independent physician groups and an accountable care organization. Tina has worked in ethics, compliance, and privacy in healthcare settings for the past 24 years, has created award-winning HIPAA and privacy programs, and serves on local and regional boards. Tina has graduated with honors from Delaware Law School, as well as with a Bachelor of Healthcare Administration from Old Dominion University. And then finally, we have Carlos Villagrán Muñoz, who is the Director of Compliance at CMPC, a 100-year-old Chilean-based company and one of the world's leading manufacturers of pulp, paper, packaging, personal care, and other forest products. CMPC operates in 8 countries in Latin America and has commercial offices in the US, Europe, and China, selling and distributing its products to more than 45 countries around the world. Carlos previously held compliance roles at the Chilean operations of Liberty Mutual Insurance, Mitsubishi, and the World Bank. So thank you, Heidi, Tina, and Carlos for joining us today. So to start off, I just want to do some kind of grounding and hear a little bit from each of you about where you are, where your organizations are in your speak up journey, so to speak. So Tina, I'm going to start with you because you have, Millennium Healthcare has a fairly well-established and mature ethics and compliance program. And so, you know, you have the benefit of your 24 years of experience that you've brought to Millennium Healthcare. You have a fairly large ethics and compliance program relative to a lot of organizations. And one of your main areas of focus has really been on making ethics and compliance accessible to the business. So tell me a little bit about what that means and what your Speak Up program specifically looks like.
Okay, well, it's I'll say we've built on it. I mean, that's one of the things I think that you know, the government says, you know, you have to have a hotline, you know, as far as people being able to speak up. But, you know, again, as far as hotline is kind of a, you know, one of those, you know, areas in which people are a little intimidated by that. So how, you know, again, can we do things a little bit differently to get people to speak up? And so one of the things that, you know, we have done here at Millennium and that I've done in my career is just trying to figure out how and where I can meet people and make, again, them know that we are approachable. You know, from the get-go, from the new hire orientation that we do, we talk about us not being the police and not, you know, again, and trying to, again, make people feel confident that when they are going to be calling us or speaking with us, that, you know, they know that we're not going to come after them in a kind of a police fashion. And I'm, you know, probably talking to the choir here because we all know that we have that persona. How can we break that down? And so, you know, I've, you know, in a couple of my past positions, I've actually used some avatars. We have Cornelius Compliance and Privacy Patty that we use now. We've used, again, different, and I know other organizations have done that as well. But then, you know, again, as far as where and how can we make those, you know, those resources more accessible to those staff. So we have placed our report it icon on everybody's desktop. So, you know, if they need to report something, then it's right there. It's easy, it's accessible. I mean, there's no reason why, and they can actually report in an anonymous fashion with that, I would say, that icon and that system that we have within our, again, our compliance department. Another thing is that, we put it in our ADP, which is our HR, say software program, where everybody has to go to, because guess what? Everybody gets paid and they want to get paid. So meet them where they are. Where else would they go? Well, again, there's the intranet. Are they going to, what are they looking at on our intranet and our internal, again, internet? And so what are they going to be looking at? Where do they go most of the time? And again, just trying to find out where those places are. So we have our reported icon right there. We have our policy and procedures too, because we want them to be able to see, those pieces, because that helps again with guidance and knowing, where staff can, again, get the best knowledge as in regards to speaking up. We have a 4-step communication process. Again, it's like, even if you don't get to talk to compliance, there's another person or another way in which you can escalate things and get things taken care of. And we make this, again, broadcast news when we're doing, again, our new hires, and then continuing throughout, our, just continued training program. We have, the non-retaliation. We're actually doing a newsletter this week or this next week coming up, where we kind of dusted off our, non-retaliation handbook that we've had for a couple of years. And it's a really smart, really short tool that people can pick up and look at, because that's the other thing is, people really don't understand what they need to report sometimes. So offering them that information, again, what would we want them to report? What do we, again, and the other thing that I, as far as making it accessible and making it approachable, is one thing that I am under review and actually implementing now, is just changing around the way in which compliance is seen. So instead of, say next time, if you ever see me again, I will not be the chief compliance and ethics officer. I'm going to be the chief ethics and compliance officer, because that's the other thing is what in my 24 years of doing say compliance, but 36 altogether, long time, one thing that people don't, again, they don't know the why. So, again, as far as making it more explanatory of how, people know that why, and if you say, well, if you got to report this because it's compliance, they scratch their head. If you say we need to report this because it's ethical, they automatically know. I mean, again, from my, background and expertise in that, is that if you say, again, those things just interchangeably, people, again, that whole idea and them and their knowledge of what is ethical and what is not ethical, as opposed to compliant and non-compliant, I mean, it just makes it very clear. If it's not ethical, I need to report that. This other reporting system that we have is called a incident complaint and reporting system. And again, as far as that icon being there, but it's another way in which people can just ask questions and not feel intimidated to pick up the hotline number. We've changed our hotline number for it to be the Ethics Connection hotline. So again, that's another way in which we make it more comfortable, approachable, and again, for people to be able to do that. And this last piece, and then I'm going to say move on to the next person, but is where I'm creating a kind of like an org chart with a face to a name and putting it out there on our internet. So, people can put a face to a name. It's so important to make those connections. And that's kind of, again, it more than anything is making those connections. And it's actually part of our core values, as far as that connect is one of our, again, core values. And when we do those connections and we create those connections, then again, people are going to feel comfortable and confident as far as coming and speaking with us. And how do you do that? That's something, again, that I think we're going to talk about in the next leg here. So, so stay tuned.
Yeah, no, the personal connections piece that you just kind of ended on it's so important. We at LRN, a lot of our work is helping organizations understand their ethical culture. What does it look like? Where do you want it to be? Kind of what's that gap? How do you get there? And so we do a lot of talking to employees, surveys, focus groups, interviews, et cetera. And I've heard that so many times where, I'm doing a focus group in a, company setting, and people talk about their reluctance to speak up because they don't know who they're talking to. And so, already like there's no foundation of trust because I don't know you. And so, it's a challenge, and particularly in today's kind of COVID environment where we're limited with our in-person interactions, but in other ways, virtual interactions have kind of increased the scale of people that we can talk to, but that face to the name of, this is who I am. And when you go here, this is who you're talking to, or if you don't want to be talking to me or to someone else, like here's where you can go where it's fully anonymous, and sort of explaining that process and removing the black box, which is another term that people often share when they're talking to us about speaking up or their lack of speaking up, is this idea of, it's a black box. I don't know what happens. It kind of goes into this portal, this void, but then like, where does it go? So,
right.
Yeah. So Carlos, I want to turn to you because you're sort of on the other end of the spectrum, or your program is on the other end of the spectrum. If Tina has this kind of well-established, mature program, CMPC is actually quite new, just a few years old. And so you're in this process of kind of building it from the ground up, which I think is a place that a lot of people on here can probably resonate with. And your program also has been kind of, the creation of it was catalyzed by an antitrust issue, which again, I think a lot of people on here can probably relate to. And somebody told me that the best compliance programs are those that are born from significant misconduct. So I would love to hear from you about what does this process of building it from the ground up look like? How are you, what have you learned, or what was the impact of the antitrust issue on CMPC's culture? Generally speaking, of course, but also specific to this idea of speaking up and accountability.
Sure. Well, first of all, Emily, thank you. Thank you, Lauren, for this great invitation. Just a quick general context of the antitrust scandal you mentioned. We're talking about serious infringements. We're talking about collusion with a competitor for around 10 years. Which affected our subsidiaries in Chile and Peru, particularly the tissue paper and personal care business units. The company self-disclosed to the authorities in 2015, and to sum up, we're talking about fines in both in Chile and Peru, $50 million in each country, plus $150 million as a voluntary compensation for consumers in Chile. But beyond that, beyond the figures and the numbers, we're really talking about a very publicly and well-known antitrust infringement case that unfortunately it's still used by local authorities in Peru and Chile as a good example of a bad conduct. So it was this conduct happened for, again, 10 years. So it was not about a particular group of employees who decided to do something wrong. It was more a cultural factor. So what about the impact of that case in our culture? Of course, just for you to know, CMPC is a very traditional, conservative, very Chilean company operating in different countries, but in the end, a very Latin American company. And people, were still, but in the past, it was even more. People joined CMPC and they work their whole life in the company. So they get attached to the company, to their values, to their principles, etc. So as you can imagine, our people, our employees were deeply affected. They were actually hurt. Some of them even knew these people, They were very, by the way, these executives who were involved in these conducts, they were very well evaluated, high performance, even awarded by the company. So everybody knew about these guys. Other people didn't understand why the company were not able to detect the situation before. If you read the executives who were involved in this case, their depositions, you will see that many of them, they say, you know what, I heard some rumors, but I thought it was normal. No one was doing anything about it. I didn't know who to report it. I thought it was normal. I heard rumors. I did nothing. So there was no speak up culture. because people didn't trust the system. They didn't knew about there was a team. There was no role modeling. There was no leadership modeling. And our company, at that time we had our ethics code with our values and principles, but those values, to be honest with you, they were void. No real content was within those values. They were just text in a code that people really didn't care about it. So there was no real interest. No one saw this as a collective responsibility, and there was not, of course, organizational justice. So what do we did, or what are we doing right now in terms of building a speak up culture? So first, we joined the company. I joined the company in 2018. We team up with great, other people, and we created a compliance team. And our first approach was to talk about a duty to report. I know it doesn't sound very sexy. It's not value-based. It's like a duty to report. Maybe you already know, Latin America, because of our legal tradition, we're very legalistic. It's all about what the law says that we can or cannot do. It's all about our contract. It's all about the description of our function. Are we supposed to do this and that? So we decided, I'm not telling you this is the good or the right or wrong way to do it, but we decided to talk to our people about a duty to report. Okay, you have a duty to report. If you see something, say something. And this here you will see a general framework of all the conducts we allow and we don't allow. It was a very do's and don'ts approach. You have to be mindful that our people was shocked. They were not prepared to talk about values and principle and speak up and Me Too movement. No, they didn't know what to do. So we start talking about this is part of your job description. This is, you see the do's and don'ts. If you see something, you have to report it because it's mandatory, And we try to build our culture from what we saw. CMPC is a very blue-collar company. It's all about the factory and the mills and the plants. So we saw that the health and safety program was very robust. One accident are way too many accidents. So we took from that experience and we started creating our own narrative, trying to from that experience. Secondly, there was a new team in town, compliance team, and we spent a lot of time in training session, but I will say more like a roundtable sessions, introducing ourselves. We are not legal. We are not internal audit. We're something different. We're here to help. We're here to hear your concerns. And we're here eventually to talk about values and principles, not only about rules. In the third place, we have a hotline. It is actually an in-house developed tool. I'm not a huge fan of those solutions, but what we did in the end is, okay, we have this tool. It doesn't work very well. Let's reshape it. Let's work with IT, with external vendors, and reconfigure this tool according to our own company, business, locations, nature, etc. And in the end, now we can see. Of course, we along with that, we did a lot of communication on campaigns and trainings. But now we are seeing some numbers that are showing that people are listening, that people are starting to use the hotline, but also they're contacting their managers. Now we can see, and just to end my comment here, Emily, we're seeing an increase in the last 4 or 5 years from around 200% of more reports, which it only says that people it's comfortable using the hotline. But what we're now, especially last year, explaining our employees with very particular specific figures and numbers, because this is a very blue collar company. 1/3 of all the reports that we receive through the hotline are proven and remediation actions are taken. What we want to say by that is that what you do matters. What you say, we're hearing. We are on the other side of the table, and we're doing something about it. Now, again, rules are not enough. Fear is not enough. Efficiency, transparency, numbers, and KPIs is not enough. Now, and I know you know about this, Emily, now we are going back to talk about values. Remember, our values were empty. They were an empty slogan. Now we're working to move from a duty to report to a speak up culture. It's a long way. It's a journey, of course. We need to change our narrative. We need to get managers involved. But now we have the employees' attention, and now I think we have some common ground, that we can use to start talking about principles and values. Yeah.
Thanks, Carlos. And what, a big takeaway that I have from what you just shared is, and it connects back to what Tina was saying as well about meeting people where you are or where they are, is that's exactly what you're doing with, or what CMPC is doing. And so kind of recognizing, we're here, we want to be here, but you can't just jump to talking about values and principles. You have to help people get there, and taking that long view, that long range view. And it seems like the early signs show that that approach is working with the increases that you're seeing, and it's also a great opportunity with with the compliance group being this new game in town, as you put it, something that didn't exist before. And so sort of there's this fresh start aspect to it all. Yeah, so thanks for sharing that. And Heidi, I want to kind of go to you now, and you work directly with the business. And so I'd love to, hear a little bit about what that relationship looks like. There's a lot of conversation, in addition to ethics and compliance, like not being the no people, not being the police, but being here to help. There's also, a lot of kind of, I think, growing recognition that ethics and compliance is also not the job of just ethics and compliance. It's the job of everybody. And so you're working directly with the business. And so, what does that look like? What is your, what does the relationship look like? How are you, supporting the business to also be those ethics and compliance ambassadors, if you will? Yeah.
Sure. I'm happy to share that. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm super excited, and I'm taking so many notes, by the way, of what I'm learning from Carlos and Tina already here. So I'm sure those on the line are doing the same. So I work for Bausch Health. I support their largest business unit. It's primarily focused in the US. And I'm essentially, not that I'm giving myself a promotion, but I'm essentially the chief compliance officer for my particular business unit, and provide them with, all compliance support, relative to their particular needs. And we do have a global team, and they work to develop their global training that is deployed to all employees annually about our Bausch Health Speak Up culture. And we develop supplemental awareness, communications on the reminders of their obligations to report concerns to the company. But generally this is done annually. And my job with my business is really to pull this throughout the year, and to make sure that we make it real, it resonates with them, they know how to pull through, they know what the expectations are. And so a lot of the ways that I do this, and just to share some of the examples. And I know Tina mentioned this, day one new hire training, getting to the people who are joining the organization on day one to provide an overview of our compliance program, communicate with them about their expectations, share with them the hotline, talk about the company, our values, the expectations, et cetera. So really hitting them as soon as they're joining the organization to make sure that they understand that compliance is critically important. Throughout, individuals who are coming on board, that we generally have a phase one training. So it's a couple of weeks after they're on, it's, as they're drinking through a fire hose relative to all the new information, but we get another opportunity to get in front of those folks and do a much more in-depth overview of the compliance program, an overview of our policies, our procedures, our processes that are applicable specifically to their role. And through that, we also cover, the Speak Up culture again and their reporting obligation. And one of the things that I do during this training is I have every single one of the employees take their phones out and take a couple minutes to put the hotline number into their phone. And because, when somebody's ready to report something, we want to make sure that it's easy and accessible. And that goes to my next point. And I know we've mentioned it a couple of times, and I think the theme of this webinar is going to be Tina's comment on meet them where they are, because I also identify with this, and I try to find ways in which they work. Where do they go? What resources, information, websites, SharePoint sites, applications do they use in their everyday jobs that we can add information about our hotline, my report, my contact information, so that it's easily accessible to them. Because again, if they want to report something and they can't find the information, they might walk away from, actually raising that particular concern to us. The only thing I would mention is keep tabs of where you put this information. So if it ever needs to be updated, you know where it is. I actually created an ethics and compliance website on somebody else's website. While it's a great idea, I'm now maintaining my own website from ethics and compliance. And now that one, and I should have thought a little bit better about creating a lot more links to the information versus having to post it in two different places. So just to watch out for all of you as you're kind of going through this. But I look throughout the year for additional touch points and training opportunities with the teams, monthly, quarterly, annual meetings that I join and further reinforce compliance, focus on key topics, as well as our reporting process and our speak up culture. When the trainings are live, oh my gosh, sorry about that. When the trainings are live, huh?
Oh, I was saying, no, that's okay.
Thank you. When the trainings are live, I look also for opportunities to do a resource fair. I love creating resources. I'm a huge component of resource. So we create, handouts. I put our phone number on business cards. I put the phone number on pens and handed it out for folks. And so that's another way to remind them of the reporting process. I'm on leadership team meetings for my business unit, and we talk about compliance expectations during those business units. I provide them with specific reminders around, the reporting process and their obligations, which we're going to get to in the next section. I ensure that compliance is part of our strategic imperatives and our annual goals for our organization, so that compliance stays front of mind. I want to continually create awareness and communication, making myself accessible, approachable, making people feel comfortable to come to me, get them to trust me. Emily, you mentioned that earlier, which is critical for our roles. I want to focus on that message of being proactive rather than reactive, getting in front of issues rather than behind them. And that I alone, and Emily, you also mentioned this before, I alone can't build a culture of compliance within my organization. We have to do this together and partner with this together. And so those are just a couple of the key things that I do in supporting my particular business. And then I share all my resources with my counterparts so that they can further pull through in their areas as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think one of you're right in that this is appearing like a theme of our conversation. So that accessibility, that meeting people where they are, but I think it's such an incredible lesson, and it's a mindset shift. So we might have our goals, our objectives, but then you got to sort of like flip the switch a little bit and put yourself in the shoes of those that you're trying to impact. And how do I change my message, or how do I communicate my message so that they hear, rather than like, what I'm trying to say, or taking that 360 view about it. And it's such an important one. And you also talked a lot about, the various places that you're communicating expectations. So the new hire, and then the few months down the line, and then in all of these business meetings. And, that's another kind of thread that I've picked up from the three of you, is around just sharing those expectations. And that's about providing guidance. And, we, in our research, we actually just completed last year completed a fairly large global research study where we were looking at, one of the main things that we were looking at was exactly what we're talking about today, speak up culture, and other aspects of culture. So we kind of surveyed 8,000 people around the world, all different types of organizations, industries, levels within the organization. And, one of the things that we found, and I've also seen this when I've worked within specific organizations, is that there can sometimes be a big knowledge gap of like, what is misconduct? What is ethical, unethical? And so sometimes it's not for, any sort of intentional sweeping of issues under the rug, but just, I just didn't realize that this was something, that I needed to report. And so Carlos, you kind of mentioned that as well, with CMPC's experience of people saying, oh, I thought this was how we did things. I didn't realize that this wasn't okay. So that there's so much like drip, drip, drip. I mean, all of you have talked about that, drip, drip, drip of here's who we are, here's how you can contact us, drip, drip, drip of, these are our expectations, these are our values, this is what it means to live those values, this is our code, our rules, our do's and don'ts. So, you have the do's and don'ts, and you have the shoulds and shouldn'ts. Anyway, that's just kind of wanted to call out the threads that I've heard across each of your, fairly, different experiences. And so we've talked about kind of the structure of this, structure of a Speak Up program. You have different reporting channels, you have policies, you have, types of outlining like types of conduct or misconduct and kind of what those means and sharing those expectations. So that's sort of, I think about that as kind of just the foundational structure. We've also talked about the employee engagement aspect of it. But another critical kind of leg of a Speak Up program, a Speak Up culture, is the role of leaders. And our research that I just mentioned, as well as many other organizations that conduct related research, have shown that the vast majority of people raise their concerns to their manager or to another manager. So of course we need to have a hotline. Every organization should have one, or some sort of anonymous confidential reporting process. But most people are not using the hotline. They're going to their immediate manager, and that really underlines the need for managers at all levels to be properly trained, supported, given the resources to handle those concerns appropriately. So Heidi, I know that you've done a lot of work, you just alluded to it, to equip managers to kind of be successful in those situations. So would love for you to share a little bit about how you've engaged with that kind of cohort within the organization.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. I appreciate it. Yeah, I look at managers as the first line of defense when it comes to reports of misconduct. To your point, when we're communicating about, the hotline resources that are available, we also say, but you can also reach out to, and the first one is your manager. And to your point, we see the statistics and the large number of, reported concerns go directly to them. As a result, like we really do need to focus on ensuring our managers understand their obligation on how to manage these situations. And while I've always maintained this focus, it was elevated. I read a blog by Christy Grant Hart, and she's the CEO of Sparks Compliance and really provides great tips and tricks. And she had this blog on, are you sure your managers know how to handle reports of misconduct? So I got a lot of great ideas out of that. And so thank you, Christy. But I built a training specifically for managers that covered the reporting process and their obligations to report and how they can foster a Speak Up culture directly with their teams, talking about compliance, making sure that they're aware of the reporting, making sure that they, communicate to their employees their confidence in the overall process, how it works, how to recognize a reported misconduct. What are the do's and don'ts? Carlos mentioned that before, related to the reported concerns, and reviewing our non-retaliation policy, because, a lot of times, we can see that managers are actually the ones who are retaliating against employees. Not all the time, but that definitely can happen. So we want to make sure that they have a clear understanding of what the non-retaliation policy is. And so I'm also big on developing enduring resources and pulled through these key topics from the training to this enduring resource. So I've got it here, and got all of our managers together and kind of shared this training, shared the resource, and it falls into a number of different areas. Creating a safe environment for their employees for reporting concerns, making sure that they also know that there's multiple ways to speak up. And the accessibility as it relates to that. And so they can further communicate that particular message. And as mentioned, as it relates to, the things that they should be doing, we want them to like listen for like the right trigger words that might come up when somebody's reporting something to them, so that they can identify these particular issues and then know how to handle it. Actively listen to their their employees, and then report the issues to the appropriate people in compliance and legal and human resources, or directly to the integrity line. And we never want them to make any promises to employees once, reported concerns come up, brush off the reported concerns, conduct their own investigation. We want to make sure that they understand what they need to do to make sure that they're bringing those matters forward and addressing them appropriately. This helps to ensure managers, understand the process, trust the process, support the process, and assist us in helping to communicate the speak up message to their employees, to build that strong culture of compliance. Separately, I developed another resource that really provided an overview of the investigations process, and I focused this on our managers to help to kind of demystify, what happens when somebody reports a concern, and helping them to know what exactly those steps are, what the touch points are, talking about the confidentiality. Why it's so important to be confidential, why sometimes when they report a concern, we can't share with them the full details associated with the outcome of that particular matter and all of the, the learnings associated with it. And that, that really, every matter that comes to our attention is reviewed and assessed. Not everything is an investigation, but when it is an investigation, it is impartially, an impartial investigation is conducted in a thorough and timely manner. And by sharing that, those key messages with them, where the hope is that they're going to pull through that with their employees, that they're going to be better equipped in the way in which they communicate that information when an issue is reported, to provide, not only themselves with the confidence, but with their employees with the confidence associated with it. And so one other thing actually two other things that we had created, our managers have tools that allows them to provide, an overview of performance for their employees. And I'm sure a lot of companies have this. And what we did was we built in compliance questions into that particular tool. And the way in which we created the questions helped them to get to a point on whether or not it's a coaching matter, that they, if there is something identified that they, through performance that they need to provide feedback to their employee, and when it rises to the level of requiring a report to, compliance or legal or, HR, et cetera. And then marking that, and we actually have the capability to run reports associated with that particular system to ensure that they're being compliant. And then finally, I developed an integrity champion network with a key set of managers that we meet on a monthly basis with a goal to further embed compliance into the culture of Bausch Health. We talk about training updates. We talk about, compliance training topics. We talk about risk within the organization and ways to mitigate that risk. We work together to develop resources. And some of these topics that I talked about as it relates to the speak up culture are a key focus area during our Integrity Champion Network meetings. And so they are an additional resource, an arm for me in my, to help further embed, the culture of compliance, here at Bausch Health, and pull through all of our initiatives. So that's a couple of things that we're doing to help our managers and continue to support a strong tone at the top in our speak up culture here at Bausch Health.
I love the integrity ambassadors cohort that you just mentioned. I mean, what a great example of operationalizing ethics and compliance and distributing that ownership. I've seen that in a number of other organizations work really successfully, and it seems like a growing trend, and I think one that is a great one to watch. So thank you for sharing that, and I hope that people on the line can take ideas and inspiration from the approach that Bausch Health is taking, it's also kind of a good segue into the last sort of leg, if you will, of a speak up program. So structure, employee engagement, managers, and then the overall, the general culture of your organization, because you can have the best program and the hotline and all the communication tools and training and all of that. But, you know, at the end of the day, if your organizational culture is not supportive of that, people will be unlikely to avail themselves of it. And so when we think about organizational culture, obviously that's a big topic. And there's lots of facets of organizational culture, but in our research, we wanted to understand, is there a specific kind of element of organizational culture that is most impactful as to whether or not people speak up? And what we found was that, this organizational justice, so whether standards of conduct are applied consistently, whether people have trust and confidence in the process and in the organization, that was really kind of an outlier in terms of the magnitude of impact that it has on whether people speak up. And so several, kind of, again, we've had some threads of that throughout this conversation, but I'd love to kind of close before we open it up to Q&A to talk about this idea of trust and building that trust in the organization, in the processes. How do you ensure that the culture matches up with the words that we're saying around, yes, we want you to speak up and you have a duty to speak up, and we have zero tolerance for retaliation. What are you doing to ensure that the culture matches up to that? And so Carlos, let me turn it over to you first.
Sure. Well, so if we're talking about organizational justice and building trust, we definitely need to start or to focus on our leaders or managers. I think, of course, Heidi said it. Managers and leaders are the first line of defense, but at the same time, they're the first line of the ones in charge that they receive concerns from their employees and from their teams. When they see something, they have a higher obligation to report it. So I will say that if we want to build trust, and then from there to strengthen our speak up culture, we need managers to be involved. We need the leaders to be involved. Last year, we began with the first program, compliance training program, but specifically designed for leaders and managers. At the beginning, yes, the focus was a little bit, legal focus, fiduciary duties. You have the duty to direct, to care, to supervise. But then we changed a little bit the focus, and we start talking about them, the leaders and the managers, as key components of a corporate cultures. They are the ones who actually, let me go back a little bit. Sometimes, specifically in Latin America, when you talk about culture, especially when you're talking about local based companies, it doesn't say much when you say culture. But when you say behavior or conduct, people start getting more used to the concept. So then when we approach the managers, we said, you touch very specific and special nerves that actually make people do one thing or another thing. You guys, the leaders, are the ones who set the objectives. Therefore, you are the ones who set the motivation for the people. You administer organizational justice every day. You are the ones who set the business strategy. You are the ones who manage the risk governance. You set standards, practices. So now, because of that role, you're in the best position actually to enhance our culture, to create a culture, to empower our employee to raise their voices. So what we did in terms of training, just to let the managers and leaders know about the role, was to say, okay, we want you to manage, to switch, to move our culture back to our values, okay? And we want you to become role modeling, leadership modeling. So let's talk about 4 pillars. And these are the 4 pillars we used last year to try to get closer to the managers and be more practical. How can you change your culture? First, communicate and set the tone. Secondly, you listen and guide. Third, you support and participate. And finally, you incentive and correct. And by each of these 4 pillars, we provided particular and real and easy to do, activities and processes they can do on a daily basis. Because sometimes when you talk about ethics and integrity and values, that seems far away. These guys, at any business, They have to make decisions every day. They act almost like a, on automatic basis. So we had, and what we did was to reinforce the message. This is something you should do in every day. This is not something that you will read on books, or this is not about a thing that you have to learn in the university. Each pillar contains 3 or 4 activities you can do every day. Set the tone, listen and guide. Again, listen and guide. You are the first line of defense when people raise concerns to you. Just a small portion of cases are reported to the hotline. And in each pillar, again, practical activities and conducts they could perform on a daily basis. And it was not only about training them, and that's it. Then we, part of this program includes follow-up sessions with the leaders and their teams eventually, just to know if they're being able to actually make those changes, to do those activities, and to provide additional, good examples that we have seen in other parts of the company. And that's a good way, again, if we're talking about organizational justice, to make the leaders know, okay, you are a partner. We are in the same team. We are part of the same effort. And I don't want to take much of the time, but other activities we have worked lately, communication, of course. We launched our first, actually, hotline related or speak up related campaign last year. The motto or the slogan was, let's protect our values, let's speak up. And this is how the hotline works. We show some transparency, which I think is a critical component of every speak up culture. This is how we deal with these cases. This is what we do with the results. These are the corrective measures we take. This matter. We do something with what you report. We provided a lot of information about due process. And this is my final comment about it. People, they see that they can go to their managers or the compliance team or to the hotline, but then all they see usually is the end of the results. Somebody's fired, a new training is performed or is delivered to the team, a new control, a new process. What about, the investigation itself? What about due process? And we start talking about the due process, obligation, duties, the rights of, not only about the one who reported, but about the people who are reported for unlawful activities or conducts that goes against our values. So that's pretty much it, Emily. I don't want to take much of the time, but that's pretty much what we have been doing lately in that matter.
Thanks, Carlos. Tina, why don't you close it out for us? How do you create a culture of organizational justice, a culture of trust to support, the talk of your Speak Out program?
Well, I'm going to say dovetail a little bit on what Heidi and Carlos said. So one in particular, as I heard them say, is listen. Do a listening tour. That's another thing as far as just going around and listening to people and talk. And then you're going to pick up on a lot as far as, again, from that culture standpoint, knowing what's going on is right or wrong. Because if you go into, and I'm going to go back to the fish philosophy to where, again, as far as the people at the Pikes fish market, again, they're throwing around these fish. They're heavy, lifters and that, but they're happy. And they're the happiest, workers in the world. If you've ever, followed or know anything about the fish philosophy as far as customer service wise and that. And so if you go into an area and you see where people are looking down and they're not paying attention and they're on their phones and they're, again, those are, again, the areas which you need to attack, right away. And as far as management goes, management needs to, take ownership of that. Why are these individuals, again, coming to work and, and having that kind of, I would say, attitude in that, or again, a culture of that. So we've got to kind of break down those walls. And do those listening exercises. This is something that I did almost in the very first year I was here, which I've been at Millennium for 4.5 years now. But I went and I sat down with 80 people individually, 20 minutes at a time, over a month's period of time. I scheduled all of them because I met with every single leader. I wanted to know what their ethics were. I wanted to know how they felt. I wanted to listen to them. And it was another one of those huge pieces where I could have that opportunity to meet them where they are. They met me where I was. But at that same time, I mean, I learned so much about the company, about them. They learned about me. It was, again, an excellent opportunity. And it showed, again, as far as what they really thought about ethics and, again, and about compliance and where the company had been and where they really wanted it to go. So, again, that was a great exercise on my part. And then the other thing, as far as like the ambassador too. So this is something that we did during the Corporate Compliance and Ethics Week. And so every single year, and even from last year to the year before, we have everyone that's participated with us in our games and our prizes and all of the activities that we have going on that week. We've named them a compliance ambassador, and we've got them, you know, these pins in that. So, you know, again, gave them that ownership, gave them that, you know, empowerment to, again, know that they know compliance, they know how to act. Because when we do those trainings, I mean, we're essentially giving them the skill building to be able to react to anything that's happening, you know, again, around them that is improper. And so when I'm going to go back just a little bit further, as far as in building that consensus is, I had the directors of this one organization I worked for, I had the directors offer up and volunteer one staff member for 6 meetings a year. 6 hours is all I wanted. And so what I did is I brought all those people into this committee, had them meet every other month for the entire year, trained them in compliance and privacy, deputized them, actually gave them a little label that they could put on their badge. And so when we met, I had 25 compliance and privacy officers out there and were able to tell me. So I had a speak up culture and a speak up committee right there to tell me what was going on out there in the field. And again, they weren't, you know, again, my staff, but they were part of the success and the effectiveness of that compliance program by having those individuals sitting there. I mean, and they would tell me everything. It was just like, you know, again, keep up, Tina, because it was like, and here we go. You know, I want to say the evolution of a compliance program is easy if you just go ahead and you just keep on, again, building upon what you've learned before and again, because then again, in a matter of just a few years, you will have a mature program, you will have a speak up culture, and people will trust you, because again, when they see that you're doing something, that you're taking action, then they know that, again, that they can trust you. And that's the important part that I think that we need to build upon too, is that if we do things, we take action, we follow up, people trust us. So again, as far as just building those relationships, taking that action, celebrating again where we possibly can when things happen for the better. This is something, again, that I had been thinking about, and actually talked to Emily and her team, because we're working on a project together with our code of conduct and ethics, is not only changing the way in which our department is labeled or seen as an ethics and compliance, but also, again, getting some commercials out there and some little vignettes of where we have successes and where, again, we can show that our managers, our employees, our leaders, again, take advantage of compliance and utilize compliance to help them get through, you know, that, say, improper, you know, activity or whatever they reported that made their lives better and made our company better for it too. So I think I'll finish up with that. I think we have a couple minutes left, and hopefully we've got some questions because I'd love to be able to see what everybody thought today.
Thanks, Tina. And I love the idea of a commercial, another way to make compliance fun and engaging.
Yep.
We have gotten a few questions in the chat. I'm going to summarize them quickly because they've been answered live, but in case so that others can benefit. Teaching managers what constitutes retaliatory behavior. You know, do you do this? So the answer is yes. You know, certainly include that as part of your manager training, share examples of retaliatory behavior. Again, people might not realize the full spectrum of what actually is considered retaliatory behavior. It's not just, you know, oh, well, you're fired or you're off this project. There's a lot more to it. So that was one question. And then the other was around distributing the authority to managers to investigate issues. and resolve issues. The answer here was no. The managers are expected to bring the issue to the appropriate organization, whether that's compliance, HR, or legal, so that it can be done, appropriately. And we are just at the top of the hour. I want to thank all of you for joining. I want to, really thank Heidi, Tina, and Carlos for joining and for sharing, your experiences. Kind of my key takeaways from our conversation are making ethics and compliance accessible. Leaning on your managers, your leaders, to have that distributed authority. It is such a cultural role modeling moment and opportunity. And then the transparency, the accountability, that closing of the loop. When people risk their job, potentially, certainly it requires a lot of vulnerability to speak up, to raise concerns, and so closing that loop with them, so that they have trust, and spread that message and would feel comfortable doing it again, as our third final kind of main takeaway. So with that, thank you everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and appreciate you tuning in.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.